Kevin here from Lighthouse. Today we want to talk about the principle of least privilege. This is one area that quite often gets overlooked, but is really critical when it comes to protecting your business and cybersecurity in general. So what this means is you want to make sure that people have access to the stuff that they need to have access to do their job, but they don't have to have access to everything. And it'd be similar to having an office building with multiple tenants in there and giving everybody a master key and they can wander around freely. It exposes you to risk that you just don't need, and you shouldn't have that. So the same thing is true with your business systems, and your business data. So what is the principle of least privilege? It's to make sure that the people that are doing their job have all of the rights that they need to do their job, but they don't have rights to be able to do stuff that they really shouldn't do. So you don't have people in marketing that have admin access to IT systems, or somebody from IT shouldn't have access to payroll. There's good reasons to make sure that those are segmented. And one of the biggest things is not just so people don't get access to the information that they don't or shouldn't be seeing, but more importantly is what happens when it gets in the hands of the wrong people. And what we want to do from a cybersecurity perspective is always kind of assume breach, and then we try to figure out, okay, how do we limit the exposure there? So how does the principle of least privilege actually work? Well, just like I mentioned, when you have people that have specific roles in your organization, sometimes they'll overlap, so you have to get creative. But for most part, you want to make sure they have all the access that they need to be able to do their job. But you want to make sure that you can contain that. So even if they start to wander off, and looking at directories that they probably shouldn't, there's some sensitive information that's on everybody's network, whether it's payroll or HR stuff or just marketing material or business strategies that you just don't need everybody looking at. You want to make sure that you can contain that. And again, what we want to always sort of focus on is what happens if access gets into the wrong hands. What can they do with that access? So to be able to address this, what you want to do is you want to take a bit of a 3-step action plan. So you want to be able to go through and look at all your systems, look at all of the way things, not just how you have your files stored, but how you have, access into your business systems. That's just as critical. So it starts off with an audit. So you go through and you look and to see what are the roles that you have in your organization, who are assigned to those roles, and are those roles appropriately assigned to both the folders and files that you're using in SharePoint to make sure that they're in the document libraries, all the way through all of the business systems where you have data that you're using for your own business. Then you go through and after you do the audit and you know what you have, that's the first place to start. Then you have to start to define the roles. And so who needs access to what? Always try to keep things as simple as possible. So don't go crazy on defining very, very granular roles, but really think about what do they need access to. Don't err on the side of being too liberal. Don't err on the side of being too tight on it. Make sure that you're somewhere in the middle so it's fairly practical, but you always want to look at what is the risk exposure if things go sideways. Then you take that, once you have that all defined and you have the systems in place, now you can do what's called a roles-based access. So you put people into groups that are assigned to the roles that you just defined, and then it makes the administration of that very simple. So it'd be like when we talked about the office environment, they got keys to the elevator to get to the right floor, and then you can break it down into what office should they be able to get into. And it's the exact same thing with your business systems. So when you start with the audit, you want to make sure that you audit all of the people in your organization. What are the different sort of pieces of information that you have in there, whether it's stored in SharePoint or business systems, just like we mentioned, or sometimes it's even, within the business systems or reporting and all kinds of different things like that. So you have to make sure that you start off with a very thorough audit, and that sets the foundations for everything else. So you have to ask the key questions. Is this really necessary for people to have access to be able to do this in order for them to do their job? Once you can answer that effectively, then you can go into the next step, which is now about defining who has access to what. So now is when you break everybody up into groups and you start to define them by functions. Try to avoid at all costs assigning specific unique individual rights to a person, because that gets really ugly really quickly. So try to define it at a level of a group level. So when you have the different roles in your organization, and typically organizations will have fairly common roles. You get accounts payable, marketing, and different things like that. So try to keep it at that level so you can throw a group of people into a specific function or security group or what have you, or role within an application, and then assign people to those roles. And it makes it way easier to make sure that you can maintain that least privilege access for everybody. So by doing everything through these groups and having the defined groups, you don't have to worry about when a new person comes on, what access do they need in every single application or everything like that. You've already set it up with the functions and the definition. So within your kind of main identity management tool, whether it's Google Workspaces or Microsoft MS 365, you create security groups that then you can then put them into. That by default will give them access to the right permissions in each of the different applications if you have single sign-on, which is something that you should do to help enforce this, but also within just the document libraries and the different sort of file structures that you have in place. All you do is you on the onboarding process, you put people into these groups. They get by default, they get access to everything that they need. And then as soon as they get removed and they leave the company or something changes, you move them into the appropriate groups from there, and it automatically propagates throughout the whole business. So you can do the enforcement through systems, and that's the most appropriate way to be able to do that. So who holds the key to your data? So we're going to be able to put people in the groups. We've already done sort of the audit, and we've created these functional groups. And then we put people into the roles that they need to be for the least privilege access. The reality is it's not just an IT function to protect your data, it's everybody's. So when we go through these exercises, we want to limit the liability. So if somebody makes a mistake, they're only limited to what they're responsible for, and they can't make a bigger mistake than that. And most importantly, and you'll hear the common theme, is what happens if or when the wrong people get access. So, through a business email compromise or any of the other sort of ways that they can get access to your systems. By going through the least privilege access, we limit the exposure for your business and what they can and can't do. If everybody had full keys to everything, it's really easy for a hacker to go in there, elevate their own access, do everything that they need to do. If we follow the least privilege access, we've narrowed down anything that they can do, and that's going to be the best way that you can approach that to make sure that when it happens, you're mitigating the exposure to the risk that falls with that. Thanks, and I hope you found that interesting. If you ever have any questions about cybersecurity or how to implement this, you can always reach out to somebody at Lighthouse. We've also included a free download for you. So there's a checklist for the implementation of least privilege access. So you can go through that. And again, if you need any help, feel free to reach out to us at info@lighthouseintegrations.com. Thanks.